Oh my God, it's behind the wheel.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
This.
Yeah.
Almost there, almost there, almost, oh my God, you got it, you got it.
What are you doing?
Okay, push with your right hand. Push with your-
Behind the wheel, I know what. You don't mind. Yeah.
Okay. Did that for breakfast.
The dogs leave May first. Oh, do they? Dogs leave May first.
They're going to reform school.
Food poisoning the other night and then ended up vomiting for 2 days.
Yeah. Thank you for your patience, guys. I'm going to reconvene the open portion of our meeting and just let you guys know and the community know that we continued our closed session, which will reconvene following this discussion of water. We didn't, no decisions were made, but we just sort of ran out of time. So anyway, John, I don't know if you want to start or Brad or, before we start, thank you very much for that document that you sent. It was really, really helpful to have that all in one place again. I know you've done similarly comprehensive documents and then bits and pieces and then comprehensive, and I'm sure it feels like you have to keep producing these things, but I found it very helpful. Thank you. Go ahead, Brad.
Okay, so Brad Marthins, Chairman of the Water Company. So the purpose of this meeting is, yes, it is. I learned. So the purpose of this meeting with the town council is really to see if we can place on the warrant authorization to borrow 3.1 million for the purpose of funding the loan portion of the proposed water improvement project for 2023. Now, the budget for the proposed project is 5.6 million, and Block Island Water Company has received a notification that a USDA grant for this project will be eligible for 45%, reducing the town's cost to 3.1 million. But I'd also like to note to you, the town council, how hard Jim and John have been working to obtain any and all monies available for grants for this project. The total allocation for the state of Rhode Island for this type of project is 2.5 million. Okay, and Block Island is getting 100% of that allocation. Okay, they've obtained USDA emergency grant monies for Wellfield 6A of $250,000, leaving a cost to the town of approximately $240 for the community. And also through their efforts, we've been able to work with the state to purchase, as you're familiar with, a 6.8 acre well field at a cost of $1 million paid by the state. Okay, the Block Island cost is $1. And this is probably the last developmental well field that's going to be available to meet the criteria. They developed an allocation model that John's been working very hard on and we'll explain here later to fairly address the requests of all customers on a category basis with the projected increase in flows and availability that we see at this point and into the near future. And also basing the project and the town's usage, this water will be approximately 25% for the town's usage of what we're putting out there, which is a pretty significant amount as well. And at this time, it's the intent that the bond repayment be paid for by the water use. And I'm gonna let John and Jim take over at this point.
Thank you very much, Brad.
Yeah, thanks, appreciate for going through that. And, you know, the Schmidt property was probably almost $1.5 million after all the due diligence and the purchase of the property and everything else. So just to go through, and I think this memo is memorializing a lot of stuff. I think we've talked about this, but I
Yes.
think a lot of it, we don't need to rehash because we've talked about it in October, but there is some new good stuff in it. So just so everyone knows, this water improvements project, my job right now is to go through what we're doing. Number one is the development of the new well field, also known as the Schmidt property. That's 6.8 acres that the Water Resources Board purchased. The plan is to put 2 wells there, one for capacity redundancy, but also some operational efficiencies exist when you can have 2 wells, not one. Also, when you have all that equipment out there, it seems to make sense to maximize the space. The second part is adding a new water storage tank. We currently have 300,000 gallons of storage. This is adding about 250,000, so it's close to half. But you have to realize, you know, this is for more buffering capacity. You have to realize if you're planning on, right now, we're max out 187,000 per day. We've done, you know, close to 200,000. That's replacing a lot of water per day. That's too much. So when you're 300,000, you're replacing almost 2/3 per day. That doesn't leave for much room for error. Tank drops really fast, it fills fast, and you don't have any buffering capacity whatsoever. It puts us in a very bad position for fire protection in the summer. So that's almost doubling our water storage, close to it. The third part is increasing the treatment capacity. Obviously, you have to replace that water. And this would enable a fully redundant system. We currently have 3 full treatment units. We need 2 this summer. We'll probably be running 2 24 hours a day. The third one is for that redundant system when you have things break or you have to do regular maintenance on it. When we start needing that third unit, let's say for 8, 12 hours a day, you need the fourth one around to start working that in and everything else. So you have to realize, and you know, maybe I can be viewed as slightly conservative with this stuff. I've seen a lot of things. I've almost had the tanks go dry several times during my tenure. And we're a standalone water facility. Most water facilities on the mainland just open up a valve to Providence Water, and it comes. We have to be extremely resilient here, or else one day we will run out of water. And anecdotally, because I'm a skier, I get weird things about skiing. Taos, New Mexico had to completely shut down their entire town because of the water didn't get invested in. That happened like last week. And that's like my worst nightmare.
Yes.
So this does happen when you don't. This was different. This was crumbling pipes that they didn't fix.
Yeah.
But same situation. You have a seasonal place, high demand. They didn't invest in the water. They ran out and had to shut down the whole place all week, and lots of revenue was lost. So it's a nice anecdote of when you don't look at your water, invest in your water, and it's probably one of our most crucial systems on this island. So that's my part. If you have any questions, I think you guys kind of knew the gist of this project, but that's what we're doing and kind of a little bit why we're doing it. If you have any questions, let me know. Jim's going to speak about the next few things about future
terrific.
connections and
Great.
everything. So if you want to just keep on cruising with our presentation, that's fine. If you got questions, let us know.
Sven, you had your hand up. Be okay just pressing on? Okay, we'll wait till the end. John, thank you, John. Go ahead.
Good
Jim.
afternoon, everybody. I guess it's my turn. And basically, when we put together this memo summarizing the activities and the request for bond authorization, my task was really to kind of develop and address the concerns the council had with regards to growth, where this growth is going to occur, how it's being formulated, et cetera. So as John and I went through this development process, it became very clear that there are 3 elements that we focused on in the potential growth of the area. we first looked at the allocation. Now, just to, by brief summary, last year's allocation came in at about over 12,000 gallons of requests. At that point, we had less than little over 2,000 gallons that we could allocate to the public. 655 gallons was allocated to public projects, and another 1,900 gallons was allocated to residential single-family homes. So that left a deficit of about 12,000 gallons that we could not commit to, that people had requested allocation for. That broke down into approximately 5,000 gallons for residential use, another 4,000 for the business commercial use, and another 3,000 for fire protection. So as we went forward, there was a lack of water that we were allowed to allocate to these various users. The next element in projecting the growth, or at least, and when I'm talking growth, I'm talking over the next 3 to 5 year planning period. And again, this is projecting, looking forward. One of the questions the council raised at one point was how many what I call connect capable, those that are in the water district but are on private wells. There is a figure in the report, figure 1, that kind of those red dots identify those properties that are on the sewer but not on the water, but within the water district. They equate to about 128 properties that have the connect capable in the district, can connect if their private wells fail. So what we were able to do was see, the beauty of our system is that we know, even though they're on private wells, we know how much water they are consuming because they're on sewers. So what we were able to do in table 1 in this report, we were able to identify the flows or the water consumption through the various months. And as you can see, July became the higher month of over 107,000 gallons a day. So projecting forward, we know not everybody's going to connect. And so we had to have a number at which we believe could happen over the next 5 years. And we took 10% of that. So we're saying that approximately 10%, or about 10,800 gallons per day, could be generated by this connect capable group.
Hey, Jim, can I interrupt and just ask a quick question? Because I had
Interrupt me
I had a
anytime.
quick question about that 10% number. Is that sort of a standard that you use? I was wondering, is that what you've seen? I was just curious about that.
Usually we use a 10% factor moving forward is growth. But again, it could be 5%. It's an arbitrary, it's a number, our best projection going forward.
Gotcha. Thank you.
But if
sir.
you have questions on these numbers, please let me know. And the last one, which to me was quite enlightening, is the town projects. So we know that the town is considering a safety complex, a new highway garage, harbor masters complex, and new medical center. On all of these facilities, the intent is to have employee housing. So we had to factor in all of the units associated with employee housing. In addition to that, there is an affordable housing project that is in the planning stages right now. There are 16 units, 2-bedroom units apiece. So if we look at all 3 of those elements, we have the affordable housing is 3,600 gallons per day. The facilities, when I'll say the employees' housing and the complexes being generated by the town, is about 3,800 gallons per day. So what we're looking at is a total of about 30,000 gallons that we would need, let's say in the plus range, for the water, company. And it's interesting, the breakdown, 25% of these projected water consumption or water values is represented by town projects.
Mhm.
Then we have about 35% on the Connect capable, and 40% is represented by the allocation that we were not able to give out. Now, if the Connect capable goes down, the town's percentage goes up and the allocation goes up a little bit in percentages. But that just gives you a general range that we did kind of look at the growth of the community and focus on where the growth is going to take place. And most of it takes place at the on the west side, where you've got the affordable housing, where you have the Harbor Masters development, and within that, some housing complexes. So that's why we came up with a projection of about 300,000 gallons. 30,000 gallons of future needs within the community. The proposed work that is undertaken can generate up to 100,000 gallons a day. So we're not pushing that limit with all of these projects. We still have a considerable area to grow and to meet the future demands of the community. So at that, I can turn it over to Amy with cost or any questions.
Thank you, Jim. I know Sven had a question.
So I guess there are two questions that I had, and now we've touched into them. The 10% number makes me very, very nervous, only because I think about the addition of the Manassas or a new hotel. I mean, theoretically, across from the Empire, if a hotel goes in there, these aren't small increments. These are, wham bam ones. And I guess your point near the end of your presentation, Jim, which was, hey, we're at 10%, that generates to 30, we have 100, and that's a pretty good buffer. But that also requires more fire suppression and all that. Have you guys looked at, I don't want to call it a worst case because that sounds wrong, but like sort of a high, medium, low of capacity, and are you really feeling that we're able to cover the high, I guess is my concern.
I think in speaking with John and looking at this for a number of years, I think we're more than capable of meeting the high. We did include some within the 2023 FY23 allocation, the Manassas, part of the Manassas is included in that. So what we know we've included in that. Have we seen 10% growth over 5 years within the Connect capable? No, we haven't. I mean, to me, that's a conservative number that we have not seen. We haven't seen a 10% growth.
Okay.
So
even with the surf or any of those additions, we haven't seen that kind of growth. Yeah. And so it just wasn't any more. It just changed a bit. John, to your presentation, and again, thanks to both of you, we had a project underway to try and look at our water capacity, in essence, aquifer and size of the aquifer. That seemed to get tabled a little bit because of some things with whatever university it was. All the discussions we're having now are about throughput, or how I phrase throughput, right? The ability to take water out, get it to its intended destination. And all these funds are about improving throughput/storage, I believe. One of the questions that I would imagine I would ask if I was in the audience is, okay, are we sure that we have the water? Do we feel good about the water? Do we know? And But maybe you can help me with that, and if we don't, what's the plan to know?
Okay, you know, and one of the beauties of our system is it's reverse osmosis. I'm currently about like literally, and probably happening during this meeting, we're starting a pump test on our well number 6 replacement. When we do these, and we've done this in other pump tests, you measure, we also have 3 shallow, old, non-productive wells. They don't really run through our system very well. We measure those wells while we conduct pump tests. It doesn't affect those wells, and we do that to prove it. So we can draw 100 gallons a minute for 24 hours, and it doesn't affect it. That's the beauty of our system. And URI did confirm, and by the way, the URI, that whole study, I mean, it was underfunded at the end of the day. They'd love to get more funding. It more focused, I think it turned into more about saltwater intrusion areas. But they did prove, you know, which we already knew, but it was good to hear from academia that, you know, they measured all of our wells for a length of time. And yes, what you are doing way down here at 250 or so feet is different than what's going on, let's say in your residential well that's at between like maybe 100, 190 is what mine's at my house. So they did, you know, through academia, something we already knew, or else after 20 years of running RO, I think someone would have come up with a dry well around us. So when it comes to the actual resource, you know, I don't have any concerns because of what we've been doing for the last 20 years. Someone had a brilliant idea to go deep and to get into this. It's the raw water, it would stain it's so loaded in iron, and it gets salts. It smells pretty bad when it's coming out of the raw. That's why we have to treat it with, you know, a high level of treatment. So when it comes to the natural resources, I don't really have a concern. The Schmidt property is also kind of a bit farther away than our other 3 wells, which is good. It's not in that same area, kind of across the street from the water company. So we are accessing a little bit of a different area if we think we're depleting the aquifer way, way down there. It's been said that the last pump test we did, we had one of the most productive wells in the state when it came to it actually bringing water back and recovering it. You would say then why don't you just draw more of that? The problem is it goes so salty. If you draw up, then it really doesn't, you know, the harder you pull, the less water you can actually make. Yes. So when it comes to the resource, I don't get that concerned about depleting the fresh water resources on this island, because what we are doing is we're treating brackish water. This is not water that is being pumped and going right into someone's, like your home or your home. Most of the people, anyone's home up here. You're not pumping this water and drinking it.
Yeah, so you went actually, you went to a great place. I wasn't actually there, which was the threat of running out of house water per
Okay.
se. I'm just more the analytical question of, okay, so we're investing all this to pull more brackish at 250, et cetera. Do we have any, what I think I heard you say was, hey, through all the testing we've done for 20 years, when we pulled and we've looked at stability, et cetera, we feel fine, but we really don't know how big that water field is, if that's.
Well, John, let me.
And I'm not saying we need
Yeah,
to
I
know,
mean,
I'm
yeah.
just, I'm
Let me-
thinking about, I'm anticipating questions.
Yeah.
Let me-
no,
let
yeah,
me-
yeah.
let me jump
That's
in
why
for a
we like
moment.
to make the distinction in between private wells and our wells are
Yeah.
drawing from 2 different buckets of
Sources.
water.
It's
Yeah.
important to,
And
it's
it was-
important to repeat that.
And it was,
repeatedly.
yes, and it was genius in the fact that Sands Pond went dry. We didn't
Yeah,
have the
yeah,
top resources
Right.
to keep on going with what was here in 1994.
Right.
So the problem, I feel like, of freshwater resource was solved with a new technology and just having deeper wells that are far deeper than residential wells.
And please understand, my question is not negative or positive.
I-
It's more anticipating the questions in about 3 weeks that might come.
A model of a unorganized glacial moraine, it would be very difficult to come up with. But we have, just to let you know, on the Schmidt property, we have hired Wright Pierce, who has great hydrogeologists on board. They were on board with the state. And they're helping us through, you know, how many wells on this property, recommendations for use of the property, how we're going to use it, well designs, all that. So if that's your question, we do have a hydrogeology team on board answering those questions for us. And certainly when this starts moving down the line, if those questions get brought up, I would turn to them because I'm not a hydrogeologist. So.
Can I ask a question? So the Schmidt property, it's purchased.
Yep.
The plan is there for 2 wells. Are the wells in yet? Have the wells been dug?
No, that's what the money for this
Okay.
project would be for the drilling and installation of the wells, the electric, the water, to get the water from.
Get the water
property to
from
the
there.
facility,
Okay,
to the
that's,
treatment
okay,
center, yeah.
okay.
So yeah, that's what this is.
The storage will happen at the water
The
company,
storage
not
is,
on the Schmidt
we have
property.
room for one more storage tank on the property that doesn't interfere with other existing pipes and infrastructure and everything else, yeah. On the water company lawn, we have room for one more, but that's about, you know, we're kind of maxed out on our ability to make, you know, put more, you know, it's a small lot, you know, it's not
Mhm.
that big, so. And Sven and I talked about that. At the last meeting, we kind of,
Yeah,
in October, we're talking about.
Sure.
We're kind of maxing out what our ability is with what we have right now. Space-wise.
Jim, did we miss anything that you wanted to?
No, I just wanted to talk a little bit about when we were developing these wells, in particular, the well 4, which was on the Lynx property. When you asked will this water disappear or will, you know, how are we recharging it? We are influenced by the ocean. So our recharge on these wells, if we shut them down, we'll go right back to the base elevation, let's say. And we can tell tidal influences, but when we monitor the elevation in the wells, we can tell how the storms events occur and the ocean tide. So the probability of us running out of water, if the oceans dry up, yes, we will. But according to global warming, we're gonna have more water than we need. So
So we're in a
but-
bountiful moment, is that what you're saying?
Yes, as far as our well, and again, I'm not the geologist, but doing this for so long, as they refer to it as a crustaceous aquifer, just look at it as a barrier between the aquifer, all the residents use, and what we're drawing from. We penetrate this impervious soil conditions to prevent us from drawing, I'll call the sole source aquifer, and allowing us to maintain our draw in the deeper brackish water.
Yes, and with both last well drills we've done, both well drillers, so I usually stop here because I've got good water and everything. And I said, that's not the contract, keep on going. So, and they hit that normal residential zone. We have them go through a bunch of hard pan clay, get on the other side. But what Jim's talking about, the crustaceous area, you know, we stand on Wisconsin era glaciation. We're into the glacier before the glacier, essentially. So 2 ice ages ago is what we're penetrating. Yeah. So if that answers your question, it might have been a little too detailed.
No, not at all. Actually, it helped. And again, I know Molly, sorry.
Oh, I'm
The
sorry.
key point, we can't repeat this enough. And I just think we just gotta keep the story and the information flowing.
Yeah, and I do think, yes, this, you know, getting out information, and I talk to a lot of people around the island that don't understand that we're treating brackish water. And like I say, I think we would have found out after our first or second summer doing this, that we do have a lot of private wells right around our area. And I do believe that we would have had a problem the first summer after drawing millions of gallons out of them and drawing them down. So that is not too much of a concern. at this
Molly, I
point.
feel like I strayed from you because I thought Jim needed to answer something. Did you get your question asked? Okay, good.
So I have a question. All right, first of all, thanks for the tour, what, a month ago, so a lot of this makes a lot more sense.
Anyone is welcome
Since
to
you
come.
walked me through it. Just so I could be clear, so table 2 on the sheet, the 30,000 gallons a day. If that's all that we contemplate, there's no new building, you guys can currently manage that number as we are today. Is that what I think I heard? No.
Oh, no, we are currently putting any new customer on a waiting list, whether they're a single family dwelling or we've stopped accepting new.
Right.
Or yes, at
Perfect.
this point, we feel that it's safe. And if we, technically, if we would just say, keep on saying yes, then the water company wouldn't have the ability to replenish the
Yes.
tank on a
Right.
daily basis is
Okay.
what's going on safely.
So now back to table 1. So thank you for that,
Yeah.
for clarifying. So, and this goes back to the risk to the town, the businesses in town that we talked about,
Yeah.
specifically the ones not on.
Yes, there are
and have
several
the
large
connection.
businesses in town that are on private wells. That's correct.
So, and further discussions with Julie at the National, because we had kept focusing on the National, but she informed me that it's both the National and the Harbor side
They're
are on the same well, and
That's
they
correct.
share
Yep.
pipes to it.
Mhm.
So when you look at June and July, or July and August, let's just for argument's say it's 100,000 not on there. How much does the National, I know it's a guesstimate, but of that 100,000 a day, what does the National and Harborside draw? And the reason I'm asking is the
Do you want to
town.
know hard numbers or not? Just curious.
Yeah, that'd be great. And the reason I'm asking is when we had this conversation, it's what if their well goes down? They're gonna yell at us that they need water when they could have gone on town water over many years. They have a well and hopefully it never goes down.
We kicked them off town water in 1994. So
Okay.
yes, that's because we couldn't provide it. My goal is to learn from the stories of the past and not get myself into that situation of David Holt, the town manager at the time, literally going to them, and Martha probably remembers this. You need to get off town water now.
Right.
That's what the situation was. I hear those stories. I've read the logbooks from 94 about running pipes across,
Yeah.
and I've heard the stories from the people who were there. And what I'm trying to do is avoid that situation
Right.
and learn from our past mistakes.
So while you're looking at the numbers, do you
Sure.
know if their well is the 200 plus, or are they in a normal residential type well? And here's my concern, and you know what it
Mhm.
is if those 2 hotels go down in the middle of the summer
Yep.
and we don't have capacity to help them.
It's also
They're
the
gonna
spring house,
scream
by the way. The spring
and-
house
and
is
the
another
spring
one.
house.
Yeah.
So they're gonna scream and the town's gotta do something, then you're down to leverage, and hopefully this is helping your argument. We make our money off the summer.
Mhm.
Those go down, you're then having to share water because you don't have the capacity, right?
Mhm.
To keep these businesses, which is guests coming to them, food, blah, blah, blah. So that is my big concern is what are these people on table 1? What are we doing for table 1 when something catastrophic, let's call it, happens? When as stewards of the town and the water should be making the argument, we've got to plan for those worst case scenarios.
So the total standby, what we called standby customer, and we calculate this annually, so I know we can pull it up quick for budgetary purposes, is about 40,000 gallons per day. That's if the Seabreeze, the Eureka, the Harborside, the National, and the Boat Basin. Those are all those accounts that were kind of standby customers. This is not my decision. I have fought long and hard for standby customers. It's not allowed anywhere else in the state. If you access town water and you make that decision, any of those go down, guess what? You're on town water. You submit to your well, you don't go back. I don't know how this will unfold in the future. I don't know whether we kind of gave it up, whether DOH will come on down. I've fought DOH every year. You're not allowed to do this. And I said, well, you guys have allowed this variance for this. And they said, well, it's good for them. It's good for us. We make some revenue. It's good for them. They have a backup. So would you rather have a dry hotel that's, on a, so it's been good for both of us, but I don't know what the future holds. It's not my decision. That's a policy decision that the board would make, but it's also falls in DOH's hands and, and the fact that they are making a huge exception for these places to, let's say, go back and forth between a
Yeah.
town water source. Once we call them very small systems or transient non-community systems. Once they access a community water system like us, they are no longer, they give up their ability to be a regulated public water supply. Except we're the only place in the state that allows that.
Can I ask
They
a
allow.
question? Several months ago at your water meeting,
Yep.
you said that the people on the standby list paid like $1,000 a year
Yep.
to be on the standby list and that you were proposing to eliminate that.
We will
Did that
not-
happen or?
we won't be able to safely provide them with water this summer. That is correct. Yeah.
Right, so I don't recall at that meeting, I know that's what you talked about, but did that
That
actually
policy
happen? Did
change
you
was
stop
made.
taking?
That policy change was.
That
made,
policy did
'cause
change. So you're not taking money from them to be on a standby list.
That's.
When
Right.
you can't provide them with the water. if
I don't.
Well, so
Well,
this
no,
list, well, so you
I don't
know the
wanna
list,
char-
right?
I-
But
we don't-
it's not an official list because they didn't pay to be
I
on
don't think
it.
it's okay to charge from someone for a service you won't be able to provide, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Right, okay,
So
I just
we're
wasn't,
saying, hey, we're not gonna be able to provide this to you. Something that opened my eyes to that is that the National and the Harborside went down, they couldn't get a well pump for 2 weeks. And a lot of these have been 24-hour things where you kind of just get through. But in today's day and age, it's the well pumps aren't,
yeah.
don't sit on shelves and, I'm ordering a pump, they're saying 16 to 20 weeks, for certain things. So when it becomes that's also opened up my eyes. Luckily that happened in September. But it really puts the rest of the water system at risk when we've accepted some other customers and kind of come to the threshold of our allocation capabilities. Yeah. So.
Can you just remind me, because you did tell me about
Yeah.
that situation? So they go down, you switch them to town water for a period of time. How did you how does the management of that work from the standpoint of maximum capacity and usage? Is there other people having to give up water use or just the way it worked? you
We
have
were
enough
able to
cover
handle
it?
we used
Okay.
to be able to handle it until we whittled down our allocation, and the policy decision was to allow a few more customers the ability to hook up as full-time customers when we were sitting here holding water for people who might use it once every 6 years. Didn't seem necessarily fair, I guess, but that was a policy decision made by the board, and we were able to get a few permanent customers on board because of that. And that was a complaint raised by the public.
Mhm.
Hey, why, that didn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
That was a little bit of public pressure going, hey, you guys are not letting us go on, but there's 6 customers who you are basically saying, but come on, and that's understandable.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a reasonable
Mhm.
argument for
Sure.
someone we're saying no to.
It's reasonable on both sides.
Yeah, I do. I understand both sides, and I'm the type of person who likes to look at both
Yeah.
sides, but that was the decision that was made.
And there's just last question. All
Yeah.
those on that list are currently pipes. It's just pressing something, turning something, and they get water?
Yeah.
Or some of them need piping done?
One of them, I don't want to get into it, but most
Okay.
of them are.
Most of them. Okay,
There's
good.
some that are
Yep.
like, it's just, well, you're paying for it, you might, yes, but all
Okay.
but one, yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
I'm sorry to for the 35th time
It's okay.
to have you repeat it.
It's okay.
Because Neil just said something that I just want to make sure was, that the clarity is brought forth. So right now, if one of those 7, just doesn't matter which one, suddenly their well fails and they need to come on the system and they call you up and say, our well failed, what do we do? What's the answer?
My answer to them at this meeting was, you better have a well pump ready to go.
Right,
and
so I'm
we're
just
getting
making sure that
like-
everybody,
Yeah.
I'm making sure that everybody knows, because I think you said, oh, you would turn them on, it's like, no, they won't.
I mean,
that's, I guess, the
Not
important,
anymore.
part, right today.
so
And I'm not saying, I'm just clarifying.
I'll go on the other side and say, you're exactly like every other transient
Yeah.
seasonal place in the rest of the state of Rhode Island.
Right. No, I'm not, I
Yeah,
was just making sure it was very
I mean,
clear.
that's the other side of the
Right.
extreme.
You said
side of
this
the
ex-
argument is saying you're just like that campground in wherever, because these are all places. Campgrounds are very typical seasonal places.
Mhm.
They're just like anyone else in Rhode Island that has to deal with a failed well pump and a PSS, very small water system like these. So everyone else in the state deals with it, scout reservations, campgrounds, all of them.
We're on the
Yeah.
same page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And last item was, I think the document said 45% funding. Is there a possibility that that will go up higher, that the 3.1 you're asking for gets covered?
At this
Higher.
point, no, there was a little window into maybe an opportunity. We did seek that opportunity. That opportunity was not there. But just to let you know on the USDA end, and I'd like to move on to the allocation model because that's very important. But it's actually right before this meeting, and Jim and I have even talked about it, the engineer approved all the engineering side stuff. I don't know if you saw that email. And
Yep.
also the loan specialist should have it underwritten by tomorrow, she says, so we should start seeing some documents here.
Great.
Pretty soon. It was no small task to get here. But 45 to 55 is usually what we get, but it's still, that's a really, the water ratepayers couldn't handle 5.6 all day, but 3.0 is a lot more
Yeah.
palatable. So,
John, there's one,
sure.
one thing. I think I'm sure it was in the 80s, when we had that extraordinarily comprehensive hydrogeology report done by Water Resources, headed by Norm Dahl. If anybody doesn't remember Norm, he was a retired MIT professor. And the net finding was that we had lots and lots of water. That was one of the things that prompted the very strict sewer regulations we have, because you can have all the water in the world. If it gets polluted, you've got a whole nother problem. But your experience and monitoring things as carefully as you have been monitoring them doesn't give you any reason to think that their net finding of plenty of water has changed.
that the what has
That their net finding that there was plenty of water.
the new URI
And
study.
well, going back and nothing has, we still have plenty of water is what I'm asking. That's what you said earlier.
Yeah.
And you explained it on the different, they call them perches. I don't remember what you call those, just levels of water. What are you
talking about
calling them?
the Ann Veiger study?
No, I'm
done on-
talking about what you said earlier with the layers.
Yeah.
of, what do we call those layers of water? As a
uh,
term.
different aquifers, I guess.
Okay,
You're going through impervious clay is basically.
okay. So, but the net, bottom line, we have water. We just have to protect water. I don't want protecting the water to be lost in any of this.
Yeah.
And I also don't want everybody to just think they can squander it anytime they feel like it.
I-
That's so important.
I agree, yes. Just to let you know on our end, also, we've taken underwater conservation measures, which I think you know about. And we also have just kind of started kicking off delivering conservation kits to low flow aerators, toilet cycle diverters, some things to our customers that they can save water. I'm assuming a lot of our locals will probably take advantage of that as well. So, but we are trying to hand them out to as many people as we possibly can. Right now is when people are getting up and running, so it's a good time. But I'd like to move to this allocation model.
I
because feel
think
like
Molly
this-
has a question.
Oh, is Molly?
No, what, I can wait. My questions are really for Amy.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
and we'll
great.
move to Amy next. I just want to, the allocation model that's been proposed, because and I've talked about this in the other meeting, 25-75 was that, right? So 25 for public projects, 75 for private projects. And then let's say you have 100 gallons, just for simple, and the private takes a large chunk of that, then it would get reset and then public projects would get whittled down. I brought this up for several years, but now is the time to change this model, which I don't think is proper. I think if we would have said 25% and held it, which is what we're strive to do soon, then maybe we would have said no to a few other projects, and then the West Side project would have had enough water. You see this and you live and you learn, you go, well, this wasn't the correct way. It's not something that I set up. This was set up in ordinances and everything, the sewer ordinances in probably the 80s. The model that we're looking at coming up with now, and we're not bound by an ordinance like the sewer is either, is to do an analysis and of what the available water we're making. Obviously, we can't make everything happen, meaning in a perfect world, you say, okay, all these places exist and there's vacant lots, there's customers that aren't on and all this. We're going to try to do our best job to allocate different uses, public, which includes affordable housing, existing single family dwellings that have private wells, existing new residential, existing commercial, new commercial. We'd like to divide the allocation model per gallon per day. And I've written this, hey, we're kind of bound to the 25% for the public project. So if we make 100,000 gallons per day available, 25,000 will go to that. That will stick. We're not going to redo the math every year to whittle down that number, which wasn't properly set up. New single family dwellings will get X amount. That'll stay that way. So a new single family dwelling goes up, they take 500, they have 500 less in that pool of water. New commercial will get X based on what we see of maybe new commercial development. They will have X amount. If a new commercial building goes up, they will have that. So we're going to change it into different kinds of water use and keep that number and keep the buckets of water the same and not reset them based on a percentage basis annually. And when you make a glut of water available, I think this is proper to do it and have these different, different uses of water and equally be able to say, this is for this is for this. And that's the model that we're exploring moving forward with the 100,000 gallons that we're making available. And I hope that in the future, then we will save water possibly and not whittle that number down. And I think if we had a different model, then we probably would have said no to somebody else. Then you probably have water for the public projects you guys want to do right now. Not to say we wouldn't need to do an expansion, but it would have done it maybe differently. So anyway, I have spoken enough. I feel like a lot of this memo, anything beyond with the rates and fees and rate structure planning, I think Amy's probably the best one. And I'm sure you have some questions for her because there's a lot of money involved. So
Sure.
I think
I have a couple of things. One is this allocation question, as you've heard from me ad nauseum in our conversations and Amy's and at the council, is really the fundamental question for me. I don't think there is any question that we need to do this infrastructure project and to have a plan for ongoing infrastructure projects. That's where I am. My concern is, and it's not unique to me. I mean, we all share the same concern, which is ultimately we're asking for the town to back with its full faith and credit, a bond issue, and it's paid for by one hopes revenues, but ultimately it's on our tally sheet, and making sure that there's ample space for public priorities is just sort of fundamental to me. And I not just to me. When I say this, I'm not saying just me, because I don't think anybody disagrees with that. And my concern is what the track is for making sure that that's the case, because obviously the financial town meeting precedes whatever policy decisions and policy determinations you're going to make. And I'd like to get a clear sense of sort of what the timeline and approach is going to be for refining that allocation model.
you know, and I think we've, you know, the board and Amy and Jim and I have come up with this concept as we see how to move forward, but I do think I think Jim and I's energy has been getting this 45% and planning and the preliminary engineering. And I think after we get through this and start getting our, you know, if we get a positive vote and getting our bid documents out and getting it running, I think at the same time, you kind of start working with the board this winter to start defining that model. And we have the model and framework. It's really running the numbers and the number of lots and, you know, what there's table 1 in there where looking at different sewer uses and defining them as different residential, and really it's a giant spreadsheet and it's going to be a lot of data crunching and all that. So I do believe, you know, after Jim and I get to a point that we feel comfortable, we start crunching these numbers and come to the board with the data, because I feel like data is going to drive a lot of this. Beyond the 25%, I feel like the public projects that's defined in our rules and regs. But beyond that, the 75% and the different uses for that is going to be extremely data driven. And so, yes, I feel like it's a task that we need to take on this winter. You know, coming up after Jim and I feel comfortable, but I think right now is getting the project up and running, and giving you guys assurances that this is our plan, and you know, really doing some long complex spreadsheets and coming to the board with the data. So, and also on the rate structure, that's a whole different beast, but it's similar. And I feel like we can have a similar timeline for this. I mean, obviously our deadline is when all this is up and running and we're accepting customers, which will probably be before we're up and running. When we're accepting new customers, you're pulling people off that waiting list and accepting. We need to have it in place. Like that's your deadline, but I'd like to have it done before then.
Right. I had two. I had that one, and then something that's not a question, but that really, just as the differences between the aquifers bears repeating, this does as well. I think a big part of the reason that we are so well positioned with USDA is because of your relationships there and the amount of trust that that important federal agency has in you. And I just, you know, want to recognize that and say thank you for it, because it is a critical piece of this that gets lost. I mean, I think everybody, including me, has this feeling like, well, the federal government should be, you know, that's what's supposed to happen. But it doesn't. What's supposed to happen, or what we hope would happen, is often not what happens. It's the work that you put in to get there and the relationships and trust that you build. So thank you.
Yeah, and our congressionals have something to do with it as well. So yeah, and Jack Reed's toured my facility recently, and that was awesome. But it helped out a lot in with, you know, getting this done and him being a supporter of this project.
So on the allocation model, in a comparable town, and I don't know if there is one, are they using a similar model? Or is this like you guys are literally creating it? And
let me tell you, I've spent my career trying to find a water system that's like us, and it doesn't exist. I've talked to water superintendents of different places. There's some close, but it's interesting. And please tell me an island that's close to this, but Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard are too big and very different. And Vinyl Haven Island and Fisher's Island are probably similar, but Vinyl Haven only has like one hotel that's in Maine. So yeah, I've been, you know, but me and the Fisher's Island superintendent have talked a fair amount over the years, but they have golf courses, so that completely wipes out everything. So,
But there are a lot of allocation model, not just water.
yeah, I don't think
mean,
anyone.
So, and this is based closer to what is normal. I looked into it, and John and I have talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
I would say the old system, or the current system, excuse me, is fairly archaic in sort of its thinking. Oh, you had it yesterday, so you always get it. I don't get anything. I mean, that's just sort of a very hierarchical, very traditional structure. This is at least a lot more even keel.
Something that's
My-
more similar is probably the West, to be
Yeah,
honest with you.
yeah.
Where
You see this a
water,
lot in Montana or
yeah,
Minnesota.
Colorado, and the cost to hook up a single family residence in Colorado is very similar to us because the water rights and everything are different west of the Mississippi than they are east. So I would say more of a model like this would exist somewhere in a town and not on an island the opposite, but it's kind of odd. But no, I don't, we have a similar thing where you have a standalone water facility that is only capable of doing so much, and out west in arid areas, they just don't have the water in general. So, but yeah, I don't think anyone runs a exactly similar type of model than this. Yeah. So. That's what I thought.
Molly, Martha, Sven, Neil, going once. Going twice. Amy?
The question of whether you want me to answer directed questions or just give you a raw.
Why don't you just sort of speak off the cuff, and I'm
Yeah,
sure
I'm
that'll
gonna
catalyze some questions.
Start by challenging John's timeframe conversations, which I think actually are going to be a little bit more accelerated. And I would say more in the 3 to 6 months, because what we're going to need to do to finalize financing and to set rates for the fiscal year 25 budget means we have to work backwards from there. So I think those exercises are really going to start pretty quickly in order to be finished when we need them to be done and implemented. So it would.
And honestly, from my perspective, at least, that gives me additional comfort because, as I said, for me, I just don't want to be in a position where we've advocated for this important and significant capital expense, and it's 2 years from now and we haven't changed what was, the stones that were in our shoe.
And not changing isn't an option.
Right.
Really. And so,
Yes.
by committing to this project, we are committing to reworking the policies from a calculation standpoint and those formulas, and all of those things tie back to the rates. And so we can't afford to pay for the project until we have adjusted the rates appropriately. And so all those things do need to come together. And so yes, I'm going to be more firm on that commitment.
That's very.
Because as you look at that funding today, getting down to, we're now going to always talk about 3.1 instead of 5.6. I've already forgotten the number. But that 45% from USDA is huge right off the top. So that changes the game from where we were talking about a year ago. And then you move next to how else are we going to pay for this? And the allocation and special considerations tier is the second tier of payment. So when somebody joins that system based on the available allocation and who gets prioritized and who comes first, they're going to make an upfront contribution, and that's going to capture the cost to develop the system to today and some of the costs that might be appropriately borne by those parties in terms of the projects that are ahead of us. So we need to be setting those numbers shortly. And the upside to that is based on the numbers we know today and the people who are looking to join the system. That can be 20 to 25% of that 3.1 million in allocation and special consideration costs. So that becomes significant in terms of our funding model, because we may be able to pay down a large chunk of that principal pretty early on.
Right.
So, that, that's something we'll talk about through the allocation. Well,
because if they know the model, maybe they could move forward with the project. What's the May?
The May is, we don't have everybody in the potential list onto the wait list. And I'm not talking about the difference of the 10% of users in the district. Those are smaller users, but others who we know may be talking about changing their water source so that we've got people who are committed on the wait list. We have others who are thinking about it. That's part of it. And then that actual calculation for public projects. What's the timing? What's the funding? What kind of model are we going to use? The Harbors facility is a good one. What is the timing of that? And when would the water company see an offset from when they actually pay that upfront allocation? And this is going to open a can of worms for another day, what is the rate that they're paying for that allocation? And that's something that will be worked out in that 3 to 9 month timeframe as you revise those rules and regulations around allocation. Historically, that's been done at a 25% rate. Public projects have been subsidized essentially by the water ratepayers to bring those projects online. Is that still appropriate? Does that shift too much of the cost to the water ratepayers to the benefit of the broader base? It's not a requirement. I don't believe that those projects are 25% or 75% subsidized. So I think those are the kinds of conversations that need to be talked about, particularly when you think of the list Jim gave of how many of those are public projects, public housing, they are to the benefit of the island as a whole.
Right.
So that's what I mean when I say may. There's.
Right. Go ahead,
So
Stan.
to that point though, and I am sort of stating this, and I guess to the commission especially, we are not pursuing any more growth in the district until all of this is done, right? So in the past, there have been opportunities to say, oh, we can get more revenue if we go down this street. We're not going down that, I'm looking at Brad very specifically. We're not going down that street anymore, commission, right?
There's
Over John's dead body?
No, there's been multiple over the last year or two, and I don't know whether my time frame's right. We have essentially denied the airport and Rose Farm and increasing our borders. I can't speak to the board policy, but right now I think that would be frivolous to start expanding our borders when we already have enough inside to more than deal with what we can do with it. So yes, I would
I agree
never
very
recommend
much.
that.
In the past, we've done that for Volity, so I'm
Yes,
just saying.
I would not recommend it anymore. And I don't think it's wise or, it's not responsible to do so at this point. But we did deny, those were two, sizable users too. And we did it because we saw what was coming, we did it kind of before we were denying it. We said, hey, we're on the brink of denying. This would not be a good look for us to be adding parcels. So,
So if we're talking about the funding, how do we pay for this? We've got the USDA, we have this sort of upfront contribution for allocation and special considerations, and then you move into the rates. And we're going to do some of that analysis when we put forward the 24 budget right now. A lot of it, like I said, is going to come in the 25 adjustments because there are really 3 groups of areas that need to be looked at. One is the cost to aid of construction allocation rate and making sure that those formulas for how the rate is calculated is also capturing all the things we need to, particularly historical costs. The second grouping is the customer and infrastructure tax and the monthly rate. And so we have a little bit of work that we know we want to do there. We've done some analysis that say there are a group of high demand, high volume users, so concentrated in the summer, large amount of gallons. And there needs to be a little bit more of a shift to make sure that population is carrying their fair burden. So we know that exercise needs to be institutionalized in the rate structure. And then sort of the third grouping is that penalty or overusage, which also gets back to allocation and some revision of that from a policy perspective, which again flows down to the rates about how we manage capacity today and how we manage capacity once we've added 100,000 gallons and how we do that through behavior and rates and assessing penalties in the appropriate way. So those are kind of the three rate-based elements that we're going to be looking at. Some of them will come through in 24, most of it in 25. So,
It's very helpful, Amy.
questions?
Any other questions from the council?
On just a financial point, I do want to point out, we have our biggest debt service loan coming off in 24, correct? That's something.
Yeah, so I
may-
guess I
maybe
want to
I'm
make
putting
a
words in your
different
mouth,
point.
but I feel like that's a very important thing to understand. It was a consolidation of a bunch of USDA loans. And that is coming off, I believe, in FY 24. We'll probably make our last payment, I guess.
It
soon.
is. Unfortunately, that represents 20% of the debt service of the company. And what we're
Yes.
talking about is basically a doubling, even after that comes off.
Yeah.
So we do have some capacity coming up, but we're talking about with the 3.1. The 3.1 of principal less some of those reductions that we may see up front would bring us to about doubling our debt service.
Which I'm not taking lightly at all.
Right. It's still a major project.
yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions, guys?
I just want to fold back to the 10% of the 5-year projection increase is public projects. And have you had any conversation about upping that 25%? You said you want to rethink it? Or spreading that out across the island, or, because it doesn't really seem right to have that all carried by the water users.
You mean the 75% discount essentially
Yeah.
of the price? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
being, I think, rethought. It's on the table because I feel as though the model doesn't work out if a large chunk's being, I don't think you make the numbers work if you're giving 75% discounts to, to someone who's about to buy a lot of allocation. And I'm not the finance person, but
But I'm talking about who is absorbing that, if that's going out
The
to the
r-
whole island. Or
no,
just
the ratepayers.
But
would
is that
absorb it.
cast in stone?
No, it is for sewer. I looked before I came. In sewer, it's an ordinance. It says the multiplier for public projects shall be 0.25. And any others, it says 1. It does not say, there's no water allocation ordinance. There's a
Well,
sewer allocation.
there
ordinance.
can be.
There can be, yes. No, there could be. Yeah, but it
But
lies in our rules and
But I know
regs.
when we, going way back when the sewer was done, the public properties were pulled out and the cost of what would have been the bonding for the sewer for the private properties was spread across the entire rate base.
Yeah.
I'll just confuse everybody if I keep talking.
And so that's an interesting thing to think about, not necessarily in the water ordinance element, but in the project financing element. So it would be much more project specific when you talked about the housing or a harbors facility or a public safety complex. And assessing the connectivity through those projects in a different way. That's something we can think about.
That's where I was trying to go. Thanks, Amy.
I do like that. I do prefer that gallonage, essentially gallon per day allocation over the percentage. I mean, the percentage is probably archaic. It probably worked for a time where it was, but. No, I'm sorry. I was moving on to a different. I may be moving back. It's entirely possible. I'm perfectly capable of it. Any other questions? No? Thank you guys for your time. This was really helpful. Thank you. We'll be doing the warrant on Wednesday. Yes? Yeah.
So the draft warrant that will come before the council on Wednesday will include the
Mhm.
borrowing authority for water. I guess, are we expecting to have a similar conversation or
I don't
it's smaller in
expect to.
scale?
Yeah, that's what I thought too. This is a very big project that, not only financially, but in terms of planning in a way that, we need to engage in over time. And I don't expect And this was great. This was certainly what I felt like I needed. Is that an answer?
Yeah, no, I think this is, everything with you guys, the last October meeting's been highly productive.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time. And I think some of you asked, like, what do you need? And these are the types of things we need is, you know, you guys focusing on this issue. And
Yeah.
I think I've said to some of you, I'm feeling very alone sometimes. And, but, you know, I've been talking about this for over 2 years and I appreciate you guys.
Over here and I'll give you a hug.
So.
Come over here and I'll give you a hug.
But I appreciate you guys, I appreciate you guys giving us the time. And
Thank you, John.
And your questions are very good and I appreciate it. So
Thank
thank
you.
you. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So I would accept a motion to return to our previously continued closed session, please.
So move.
Second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Thank you, guys.
Opposed? No.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, Jim.
The board.
Millie's got it. Don't worry. She went from the other side of the room. She'll be. Thanks, John.